Thank you very much, Rico, for being with me all the way from your home.
Thank
Can
you.
you first introduce yourself in your own words?
Sure. My name is Rico Speight. I'm a filmmaker, independent filmmaker, and editor and producer. I'm based in Harlem, that's New York City, and I have been focused on this particular production, which is now coming out during the occasion of Frantz Fanon's centenary. I started this project in 2007. And so I'm pretending that the reason that it took so long is that I was waiting for the centenary, you see?
It's
So,
okay. Yeah,
yeah.
but that's good luck,
So,
actually.
yeah. So
But
that's the
I
way that is. But yeah, so we're very, very, happy that we were invited by the Frantz Fanon Foundation and Mireille Fanon, who is also has been a supporter and a participant in the project. Yeah, so those are the things that I can say. Yeah.
Brilliant. And what I would like to know is how you started being so interested in Frantz Fanon as an American, and he's French, Martiniquais, Algerian. And also when you decided that you could do a film about Fanon, because we all know it's not always easy to tell in pictures the story of a writer, of an anti-colonial hero. So how did it start for you?
Well, my initial interest in this subject goes back early. I'm from North Carolina. That's in the American South,
Yes.
where issues of race and privilege and power are very, prominent. And when I was a teenager, I had an uncle who introduced me to another philosophical thinker, Emerson, Ralph Waldo Emerson. And so he told me I should read this. My uncle told me you need to read this essay, Compensation. So that was so I didn't know that was the beginning, but it was because in college when I was assigned to read Fanon, I saw that there was some kind of collaboration, I felt, in terms of this idea, Emerson's notion that every action has its own moral weight. It kind of aligned with Fanon's argument that, colonial violence scars both the people who are oppressed and those who are doing the oppressing. And so this idea that the universe kind of remembers the actions and that the consequences obtained really kind of support what I found out with Fanon. So that really resonated with me. It was also a way to be relieved because, you can get angry and feel that things are unfair, and that you personally need to kind of create a balance because things are unfair. But when you have the idea that for anyone that that there's a problem, but it's a problem that belongs to everybody, and to the extent that each person is involved in solving that problem, to that extent are they in a better position. So it's not on me to solve the problem for everybody. The problem that people have, whether they're white and they're having problems with superiority, that unless they get that resolve and find their way back to humanity, that's on them. To the extent that any African American or Black or whatever minority, that those people are involved with, kind of internalizing this inferiority, to the extent that those people can get beyond that, that's on them. So this kind of way of not having to like take on all of that was just so refreshing, to understand that. And so that was the beginning of my interest in Fanon because of, especially in Black Skin, White Mask, where he's really talking about that. And I think that that's a different way than the way that is typically kind of in the typical discourse. That's not the way it's looked at. They're problem people. And so these problem people, are creating problems for everybody. So, Fanon was a good way and a good understanding. So it's that understanding. And I just felt that even then, and that was like, as I said, I started this because I was doing other work on other issues, international issues. I did the one film I did was on the it's called Who's Gonna Take the Weight, and it looked at young people in the United States uh, uh, approaching the end of apartheid, comparing them to young people in South Africa approaching the end of apartheid, and looking at how there were, imbalances or similarities and all of that. So I was already looking at these kinds of questions and these kinds of issues. And then at some point, Fanon just seemed like the next logical step.
Brilliant. And what did you want to do about Fanon with your film? Is it about retelling his life, or do you go from one particular text, particular book, or one moment of his life that you think will bring a new light to a new public with your own writing, your own style?
Yeah, well, the book really kind of traces, it's a combination. It looks at his life, his thought, as a psychiatrist, as an anti-colonial theorist, and it looks at it through the lens of contemporary, that he is. It looks at it through the lens of contemporary struggles. So while it's tracing his life, it's also looking at his ideas in the context of some of the issues that we are dealing with, especially because it took so long to do it. So it started to look at the issues like that happened here in the United States, because I'm here, Trayvon Martin, George Floyd, and even the 2021 Capitol attack, all these things that were coming up. And so the application to me of Fanon's ideas to those kind of questions made those questions and made those occurrences kind of align in terms of the concepts that Fanon was espousing. So we're looking at both. It does follow the trajectory of Fanon's biography. We start in Martinique, and then we go to the time in Europe, and during that Europe part, also kind of intercutting American stuff. And then we go to Algeria, where he ended up, So it's kind of following that, but it's raising questions along the way. And we have a number of people that are there. We have, some of the people from his family, like we have his son, Olivier, we have his daughter, Mireille, we have his niece, her name is Francine Fanon. She's a psychologist who's based in Martinique. And we had his first cousin, who was his childhood playmate. His name was Fulbert Fanon. So it was just really, and also, so we had those family folk. Then we also had Dr. Alice Shirky, who was Fanon's intern at one point, to kind of give that perspective. And through it all, we also had kind of like a narrative voice in a way. This Fanon scholar that I met along the way, his name is Lewis Gordon. He's the head of the philosophy department at University of Connecticut, and so he's written, a lot on Fanon. So we have those voices that are really kind of looking at these contemporary issues and trying to find the relevance of Fanon's ideas to each of those occurrences.
And for today. So I think what is interesting is also the evolution of the reception and perception of Fanon's life and writing throughout the different generations after his passing. So I'm talking to you from France, and my family's from Algeria. And I can see that there was a time here where Fanon's voice was very silent in France and even in North Africa. And I think the new generation is really interested in rediscovering him. And one thing that is certain is that the United States, through the voice of people like you, actually never forgot Fanon. So can you say a little bit about that? Do you feel that when you come to Europe, and do you have this interest on how his legacy has traveled and is now, I think, come back stronger? And it's lucky that it's the centenary, but I'd like to know how it works for you, and how difficult or how actually easy it is to talk about Fanon now.
Yeah, I think there's a receptivity to Fanon's ideas again. I mean, I think that for generations, each generation sort of, as in terms of his own quote, they kind of have to become aware and then take responsibility as they will. So I feel like that's happening again. And I feel like the film is helping to kind of bring that back, into focus. As we know that in terms of the United States, one of the ways that Fanon's ideas became really popularized was during the period of the Black Panther Party, because one of the interviewees, Daruba Ben Wahad, talks about how Wretched of the Earth was like essential reading, for them in the 1960s. So that kind of connection, did obtain there, and it kept it active in a certain way. And so people, and the idea also that Fanon, I mean, this, how uncanny is it that Fanon just happens to be born a month after Malcolm X, and they're echoing similar themes. And so there was always that connection between Malcolm X and so many others, but particularly those two, because they both are celebrating the same centenary, 1925, when they were born. Malcolm in May, and Fanon in July. And so those kind of things. And so I think in the documentary, we try to make that connection, in terms of the kinds of ideas that people, because so many people on this side, almost absolutely everybody, whether they're in the boomer generations or all the X's and all these other generations, everybody knows about Malcolm X, and so if you can make that connection, it really helps to proliferate, that when people understand that there's connection. So there was that, and we had that to work with and to build on, and that's what we've done. But we've also worked with organizations that were doing that same kind of work, and that is also important in the film, who also have those direct connections with people from different generations. For instance, in the film, we have people, an organizer from something here called the December 12th movement, and they did a lot of mobilizing around the killing of Michael Brown that was in 2014. And so they were there. And so these are people who really see that, the connections are ever there. And I think that made it a little bit more receptive. In terms of overseas, at least in France, based on just how we were able to find the people, the voices that we could use, that we could get to become involved, how we found, Mireille Fanon, and she, in fact, it's so coincidental, her work starting the Frantz Fanon Foundation was the same year. She started the Frantz Fanon Foundation in 2007, the same year that we started this project. I did not know her, but we came to know her. And so it's just like that was that. And with so many of the same interests and the same ideas. And so that was just, for us, serendipity that worked in our favor. And also some of the other voices that we have, like Dr. Alice Shirky. I mean, those are, and that connection, that long cross, is a cross-generational connection that she had from Fanon beginning from the 1950s. And so when he and she both were in Algeria together and they were working there, but that has continued. And she's written books about that. But also because I was fortunate to learn these people and work with them, I did understand. And also, I was able to understand that there were differences between how Fanon was remembered in the United States compared to other settings. It was similar even in Martinique, this idea that Fanon as a voice that is still relevant and known was similarly different than in the United States. And so even when we talked to people there, that while, there were people that were close with Fanon, like Aimé Césaire, whose names, his name is like household, but Fanon's name was not similarly household, even in Martinique. So I think that there is a difference in how Fanon has been, how Fanon's influence has been active throughout these time periods. So I'm kind of rambling, but.
No, but that's interesting because it's your experience as well, and it's not true for everyone, but I think it really rings true. Another element, of course, and I find that is sometimes forgotten, is that Frantz Fanon was actually working very much and very deeply the last year of his life in the rest of Africa, not only Algeria. Algeria wasn't free, but Ghana was independent, and he travel there, and you mentioned Malcolm X, but Fanon is also born the same year as Patrice Lumumba,
That's right.
the
That's right.
iconic Prime Minister of the Congo. So was this something that you could embrace, making the film from New York with this connection in Paris and Martinique? Do you think that Fanon is also an African icon?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, I would think that one of the things that, in terms of my own personal background, one of the projects in making this film from 2007 to now, which is 17 years, there were times when there was just, there were no resources. So we just had to stop. That's why it took so long, really. So I would stop and I would do another project. One of the projects that I did was I did an off-Broadway production of Aimé Césaire's A Season in the Congo. So I was really kind of deeply involved with that whole experience, which was Fanon as well. Was very, very involved with that, how that all unfolded. And as you say, also a person who was born that same year. So that kind of connection, and Fanon's, voice as a representation of, I mean, and how Fanon as a voice of decolonialization has continued to be actively kind of restored and honored, even in South Africa. So so here I am in all these projects that I'm doing, that it's coming up again, that Fanon's voice in terms of inspiring the young people who were toying, in the 1980s, to really become actively again engaged with Fanon in terms of that anti-apartheid struggle in South Africa. It became completely active, and then now, 25 years later, when the students are protesting the implementation of fees in South Africa and protesting that, Fanon again invoked in those struggles again, as well as now Fanon being invoked in the struggles for the protests in Palestine. I mean, every struggle in which the issue of decolonization is heightened, there's a natural entree to the reintroduction of Fanon, because I mean, Fanon has said that decolonization is always violent. It's not that he was espousing violence. He's just saying that because of the nature of the relationships within those kind of paradigms, that violence is already there, and so that the ability to negotiate it has obviously already been settled. And it's not that the people who are the subaltern, that they can run away from it, because I think it's important for them. So I feel like that connection between Fanon and struggles across generations and also across spaces is completely current in a certain way, ever there. Yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned that issue of violence. I think my understanding of why Fanon's books disappeared so profoundly from French libraries and universities is because of that misunderstanding that he was one of the strong names with Malcolm X to say, in order to be free, you need to be violent. But actually, most of his work is about how humans survive despite violence, and how in order to be human again, you need to cancel your superiority. And it's actually the colonizer that makes the colonized in a position where he can't be free. So the violence, as you said, comes first from the system, that is colonization, that has been obviously kind of denied or reframed in Europe after the first independence, because of the history of Europe itself, right? The focus on World War II, and then after that on the Cold War. So I guess for you, I wanted to ask you, in the story of Fanon, he had a very short life, but very eventful. So it's almost, he had the life of like 200 men in 3 little decades. So if you could choose, and if you've done that with your film, maybe one moment where we can finally understand the depths of his writing about psychiatry first, and then freedom, and then the mind of a human being, what would you tell, for instance, audiences who don't know much about him? What moment would you say for you defined the life of Frantz Fanon?
Well, I mean, as you said, he had many lives, and they were related to many varied experiences, both personal and that were political and that were professional in terms of, you know, his work and his profoundly impactful work in terms of psychoanalysis and all of that. So it's hard to choose the one over the other. I mean, for me, as I said earlier, um, this idea of Fanon's interest in a profound kind of humanism that runs through his work, to me, that's probably because it kind of goes through all of the phases and all of it was always there. He was always interested and had a commitment to liberation, but not only in terms of revolution, but in terms of restoring human dignity. That was the point. And that was the need in terms of all of those things. So the fact that that continued, that profound humanism that runs through his work, that runs through the period that initially got me interested, the black skin, white mask period, when he's looking at the issue because of his experience in Europe, where he's now suddenly, you know, he's been reduced to, you know, the whole embodiment question is something that he's now living through in a train where he's on there and some young kid looks at him and is afraid because he's a black man. And so now he, unlike the way he was raised in Martinique, he's now seeing that he's been otherized. And so therefore he has to now take that on and not allow that to, you know, to impact him in terms of that internalizing inferiority. Because the whole idea of this human experience is that the human experience is a social experience that people are, in order to really create a human connection, it has to be a parallel connection. It cannot be a connection that is hierarchical, because in that way, the ability to be able to see eye to eye, which is the human experience, is obliterated. You don't have that choice. So until you are able to see, come down and, you know, meet each other in a certain way, that is eye to eye, it would be impossible. And Fanon understood that both in his practice, but also in the political arena. And so he was looking at that. So, I mean, I think that, I also think that, so I think that the whole, I kind of look at him in terms of the literature, you know, in terms of his writings. So that whole period, 1952 was when he came out with Black Skin, White Mask. And so that was really just written right after, you know, World War II, at a time when, you know, the winds of change were blowing throughout Africa, and this whole idea of just trying to find a way to go beyond this racism and colonial oppression that was happening all around the world. Oh, excuse me. Sorry. So I think that was one phase. And then by the time when he's close, you know, when we're getting into that third decade and he's now in Algeria and having been launched as an ambassador and a representative of the Algerian government to sub-Saharan Africa. And now he's beginning to gather the material to write Wretched of the Earth, which is a completely different experience. And now he's able to incorporate, you know, not only the idea of people who have been oppressed colonially and have fought for the end of that colonial experience, but he's also now looking at people who've now been instated as nationals in a state that's no longer colonial, and then the experiences and the problems that they are facing. So he's covering a lot of territory in ways that are meaningful, but and also in ways that are experiential, because he's there experiencing them and dealing with the people. And so all of that is impactful. So I think that, as I said, what got me started was the whole idea of just a new understanding of what the problem of race means and what it requires, what it and how it is possible for a place like in this America, you know, where we are, for Fanon's view, even though he wasn't here, to be able to see the depths of that problem and really speak on it and write about it, you know, early on.
Yes, of course. Really interesting. We only have a few more minutes because of the Zoom call, but I just want to ask you as well what will be the life of the film. So you coming to Paris to show it, it's the world premiere somehow. And then are you going to festivals? Are you going to show it all over the world? I mean, I guess it's going to show it in the US as well. So tell us a bit about the prospects.
Thank you. So, I mean, the film, it's been so, well, I have to say that I think that the appetite of programmers right now, and this could be a rationalization for sure, but for films that look at subjects like Fanon, that look at subjects like the 2021 Capitol uprising, that are critical of the look at those issues, those incidents critically, that look at George, that because George Floyd came and left, so that will bring that back to the fore. Those are not the kind of subject matters I think that some programmers are looking for. So I mean, I'm not experiencing, I've had much better reception with previous projects than this in terms of festivals, but for sure. But the film has been selected for the Amicorti International Film Festival. That's in Italy. It's right around, it's just ending now in Italy. It also won awards for what's called the New York Documentary Film Awards. It also won the Bangkok Movie Awards, and it was a finalist for the London Director Awards. So, it's getting around. I'm still, my obligation, because this is the centenary, is to do everything that's humanly possible to get the film out in every possible way. And that's what I'm doing. I'm giving it this full year. And then after that, I have to move on with life. But this is his year. And I'm here to, I'm committed as he's committed. And I'm going to do everything I can to get it there. We still haven't had a New York premiere. We've shown excerpts of it at the New School here, and they're very well received. But these are people, not the programmers.
Of course, yeah, and that's doesn't surprise me somehow. Well, thank you very, very much. If you want to add a word, it was a pleasure having you on. And
Melissa, thank you so much. Thank you very, very much for being interested.